the last time we saw Dakorien Moore. As soon as he hit the field, he was balling. As a freshman, this kid earned a starting spot with Oregon early on in the season and proceeded to not only dominate the Big Ten, but the entirety of college football on his way to becoming the best receiver in the nation. Throughout his first year, he was already beginning to become an icon throughout the country, all while leading Oregon to the national championship. And it was actually a game where Dakorien had one of the greatest performances of all time. Unfortunately, Oregon would go on to lose this game to Georgia despite Dakorien's excellent performance. Which brings us to today, where Dakorien has decided to stay with Oregon for his sophomore season, because despite the fact that he has tons of offers from some of the best teams in the country, he truly believes that he can make history with Oregon. And on top of that, this year they are going to let him switch to number 1. So now Dakorien is ecstatic about getting into his sophomore season and potentially getting Oregon back to the national championship. But first, it all starts with game number 1, as Oregon is set to face off against Boise State. Now, it didn't take long for Oregon to face a complete bust in coverage, and just like that, Dakorien was moving his way towards the end zone for his first touchdown of the season on his first catch of the season. Now that right there is definitely the way you want to get things started, but unfortunately it did not stay that way. Because after Boise State picks off Oregon on their next drive, this Oregon offense would continue to struggle throughout the second quarter. Dante Moore, who was still the quarterback, even went on to throw another interception while targeting Dakorien. So now after halftime, things were not looking good with Oregon down by 2 possessions. But they started to get things back going by targeting a receiver on the opposite side and bring it back to a 1-score game. But by the end of this game, with less than 3 minutes left, even with Dakorien coming up with another catch that resulted in a touchdown, giving Oregon some life for a potential comeback. Sadly, things did not turn out that way, as Oregon would go on to lose their first game of the season, 31-25. And Dakorien had a great game with 5 receptions, 163 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but obviously this is not the way he wanted to start his sophomore season. The good news is that the coaches decided to put him back to wide receiver 1, and Dakorien was not messing around this year, man. He was going to try to do everything he could to get his team back to the Natty. So after winning probably his final position battle of his career, he had time to think about how bad that loss to Georgia hurt him. But Oregon cannot keep taking losses like this, or else they won't even have a chance to be in that position. So Dakorien in this offense has to make sure that they lock in going on the road in their second game against Ohio State. And Dakorien seems to be pretty locked in early on. He's able to get right past the defender on this play and make a catch on the outside, and easily burn past the safety on his way towards the end zone for a touchdown, not even a couple minutes into this game. But on the road and even with the crowd, this Oregon offense seems to be clicking. Because after Dakorien runs his post over the middle, he comes up with another catch. Except this time he's streaking up the middle of the field as he's going in for his second touchdown of the game in the first quarter. At the start of the second quarter, he ran this slant over the middle and dove towards the end zone for what could have been his third touchdown of the game, but unfortunately Oregon would actually get stopped on the goal line on that drive. The good news is that Oregon was getting the ball right back with great field position, and now Dakorien was able to come up with his third touchdown catch of the day, giving Oregon the 24-0 lead over Ohio State, and already doing enough to put this game away, as Oregon goes on to win 27-14, in a game where Dakorien went for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, an excellent performance that earns him Offensive Player of the Week. But Dakorien does not like the fact that Oregon is ranked 11th. He's trying to help get his team a bye week in the first round of the playoffs, but the only way to do that is to continue winning, which means that now they have to take down an in-state rival as they are set to face off against Oregon State. To start this game, this Oregon offense was not doing so hot. They were taking multiple shots at Dakorien Moore, but none of them were really hitting. It wouldn't be until around 20 seconds left remaining in the first quarter where Dakorien would just glide past his cornerback and find his way open for a touchdown. Absolutely nobody over the top as he crosses over the goal line for a score to tie it up at 7. Throughout the first half though, even with Dakorien making tons of plays over the middle to get his team in great position, a lot of their drives would end up stalling out because of bad passes and or sacks. Luckily not pushing them too far out of field goal range so that they have the 10-7 lead after half. But Dakorien was continuing to be the guy to make those plays over the middle and move the chains for Oregon. And before the end of the third quarter, Oregon would finally get back in the end zone and start gaining some momentum throughout the rest of the game. Because by the end of the game, it would come down to this 3rd and 15, where Dakorien would run this crosser over the middle and not only pick up the first down, but as he moves the sticks, he helps pick up another victory for Oregon, as they go on to close this game out 23-14, with Dakorien winning another player of the game with almost 150 yards and 1 touchdown. And with the level of stardom that Dakorien has reached, it was no surprise that he was getting NIL deals all the time now. He signed his first one of the season, but there was definitely more to come. On top of that, he was still working hard to reach newer heights as a player and unlock levels that have never been seen before. But he knew all that work was going to continue to transfer to the field, especially with Oregon set to face off against one of their biggest rivals, Washington. We start this game off with Oregon taking a shot deep to Dakorien, and he says "Wang," snagging this ball right off the defensive back's head, and this turned out to be a play that actually put Dakorien over 3,000 yards on his career. Absolutely outstanding for only being in your second year, but unfortunately this drive would end in 3. When he got the ball back on the next drive though, he was going to make sure that he finished it off with 7. So after running this zig route to the outside, he runs up a little bit before jumping over a defender and making his way across the goal line for a touchdown. Easily one of the best plays of his career as he just leaps over that dude and gets in for 7 for Oregon. And things were looking good for Oregon, but unfortunately right before half, Dante Moore throws a pick that sets Washington up with another score, and now when they get the ball back after halftime, this game is tied at 17. But they had the idea to just keep taking shots at Dakorien Moore, and it was definitely working out. This particular drive only ended in 3, but as the fourth quarter rolled around, he would find himself wide open in the corner of the end zone once again, and he was helping to put away another game for the Oregon Ducks. In a game where they squeaked it out 27-24, and Dakorien actually had his highest reception total of the season with 9, to go with 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it was kind of crazy to think that he was doing all this with no Evan Stewart opposite of him. He even had some reporters asking him what he's going to do now that Evan isn't there.
I play with confidence, that's really my mojo. Like, if I'm not confident, then I'm not myself, but I'm always confident.
Yeah, his confidence was probably the reason why he signed another NIL deal, and also had no problem with the coaches challenging him for their upcoming game, because Oregon is about to head into another Big Ten matchup, but this time it'll be against a top 25 ranked opponent. Unfortunately, there were a lot of times throughout the season where Dakorien and Dante were not on the same page, and the first half of this game was definitely one of those times. But by the end of the half, with Dakorien running a skinny post over the middle and there being no safety over the top, it was pretty easy for them to get connected. As Dakorien would come up with his first catch of the game, and it looks like he's going to the end zone, but he gets stopped down at the 1-yard line. Luckily though, in the next play, it was also Dakorien who finished off the play, getting Oregon in the end zone for a touchdown to take the lead. Now in the second half, this Oregon offense started to move a lot more efficiently as other players were also getting in the end zone as well. Oregon has another receiver, Dickey, who had been here the previous season, who was beginning to show how effective he could be playing opposite of Dakorien Moore. But by the end of the game, it seems like just everybody was making plays, as the tight end was able to make a catch up the middle and get across the goal line for another score to effectively put an end to this game, with Oregon going on to demolish Illinois 38-7. And shout out to Dante Moore for winning player of the game for his excellent passing performance. The entire receiving room had contributed, but of course Dakorien was leading the team like he had been the past 2 seasons. Now, a lot of people on Oregon's schedule were beginning to grow scared because they knew that Dakorien was only going to get better. And even though he wasn't leading the country in yards quite yet, he had played 2 less games than the leader. And in pretty much any game, Dakorien Moore was a threat to go for over 200 yards. And a lot of teams seem to know that, including Michigan State, who just so happened to be Oregon's next opponent. And this was definitely a game where Oregon was going to try to take some shots deep, but they noticed that Michigan State had some extra coverage for Dakorien Moore. A lot of times they were moving defenders over so they can bracket him towards the middle and keep him contained. But the way they had him clamped up kind of started to free up some other receivers, as Dickey over there gets in for his 3rd touchdown in just 2 weeks. But like I said, man, he was out here double teaming Dakorien, and there wasn't really much he can do, especially when he was getting thrown shitty ass passes. In the second half, Oregon found themselves down by 10, but Dakorien was making some plays to start moving his team downfield. He eventually got them inside the red zone where he ran this weird looking out route, but was able to get open for a touchdown, getting in for a score that makes it now a 3-point deficit for Oregon. But luckily, it would remain that way until the fourth quarter where they got the ball back. And with the only place that Dakorien could really go being the middle, he was taking whatever he could get. And with this clock winding down, Dakorien would finally be able to slip past the defender, make a catch towards the outside, and bring his team down towards the 1-yard line, where he might have been inches away from a touchdown, but it was all good though, because now he can chew clock, and the Oregon running back can waltz across the goal line for a touchdown to complete the second half comeback and lock in another victory for Oregon, with Oregon going on to win this game 21-17. And despite being double-teamed all game, Dakorien still went for over 100 yards and a touchdown, winning player of the game. And at this point, Dakorien felt incredible going into the rest of his season. And he felt really confident that Oregon was going to keep winning and continue to keep up this level of play. And not just because they have a great coach or a good quarterback or an excellent defense, but because he truly felt like he might be the chosen one. Dakorien Moore came out in a game against Michigan and he was frying these boys up, double team or not. And after getting in for his first touchdown, he realized that he understands it now. Because throughout this game, he continued to find a way to get open downfield. And even with the quarterback throwing this ball to the Earth's stratosphere, he still comes down with this catch, right before being dragged across the goal line for a touchdown to give Oregon the lead. But as he continued to cook them, I guess Michigan forgot that they had to guard him, and he continued to come up with catches downfield, this time breaking off a tackler before running across the goal line and eventually being tackled in the end zone for another score, and by now doing enough to put this game away. as Oregon won 31-14 in another game that Dakorien went for over 200 yards, but this time with 3 touchdowns. This kid was absolutely balling, and of course another NIL deal just falls right in his lap. But there were bound to be more as he continues on with this season and into his next game against Oklahoma State. And this was a game where Dakorien continued to make catches downfield for his team, eventually bringing him down to the goal line where they gave him a touch pass, and he was easily able to make it across the goal line for maybe his easiest touchdown of his career. But even in games where this Oregon offense was struggling all throughout, all it would take was one play to Dakorien Moore to make it all look so easy, because he was easily the most consistent player in the country as far as making a play for his team, especially when they needed it most, and getting them across the goal line for a touchdown. He did it in the biggest moments of the game here against Oklahoma State, and it's no surprise that they would go on to win 21-14. Having another incredible 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, one score that turned out to be a very clutch game winner. It was no surprise that he continued his domination against Northwestern. He was only able to get in for 1 touchdown throughout the entire first half, but it was all good though, man, because he had something for that second half. At the end of the third quarter, he was coming up with another catch over the middle, and there was nobody going to stop him on his way to the end zone for his second score of the game. But after Oregon was given the ball right back at the goal line, Dakorien would take advantage with his 3rd touchdown of the game to put Oregon up 21-7. And by the end of the game, he was just doing it for shits and giggles because he got in for another touchdown, already doing way more than enough to put an end to this game, as Oregon would go on to beat the brakes off of Northwestern 38-7, in a game where Dakorien had 10 receptions, 4 of them being touchdowns. Now, Dakorien was doing all of this while still taking care of the student part of being a student athlete, but at the moment, really nothing came before what he was trying to accomplish with Oregon, and he damn sure was not going to let the 25th ranked team in the country stand in his way. Dakorien came out on the road against USC, and it was safe to say that this wasn't unlike any of his previous games, because very early on he was coming up with the catch and streaking downfield for his first points of the game to extend Oregon's early lead. And by the end of the game, he was out there playing on the opposite side, still finding a way to get open over the top and get in for another touchdown, extending their lead even further on their way to a 28-10 victory. And at this point, with the way that Dakorien was playing, it was not only likely that Oregon would make their way into the college football playoffs, but Dakorien even had a chance to potentially win a Heisman Trophy. Now, the Ducks have had a quarterback win it, but he could be the first ever receiver to win the award for them. And it seems like Sports Illustrated also thinks that he could win it too. The important thing is they're closing out their season strong in the last 2 games of the regular season, especially in their next one as they face off against fake-ass Patrick Mahomes in Nebraska. And this was the game where some of Dakorien's biggest contributions were actually on display. He was able to take this jet pass upfield before saying hey, and picking up a big chunky yardage for his team. But for large portions of this game, it was actually other players that were coming up big. Like Dickey, he was breaking off multiple tacklers and bringing Oregon inside the goal-to-goal territory, while the running back who was able to cap the drive off with a touchdown before coming out on the following drive and coming up with the catch and breaking off 2 tacklers on his way towards the end zone for another touchdown on his day. It was a 14-14 ball game, and Dakorien hadn't accounted for any of the scores. But he was definitely trying to change that in the second half as he was able to find himself wide open over the top. And it seems like there was absolutely nobody in the vicinity as he was getting his team across the goal line for another score in this game, giving Oregon back the lead in the process, but they still had some work to do to try and maintain it. So even when Dakorien wasn't open, he was trying to get himself open and move the chains for the Ducks. But after this drive ultimately ends in only 3 points, this would turn out to be a tie ball game with under 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter. And once again, we had some other players coming up with big plays to move them in scoring position. But on this 2nd down and 1, they decided to take a shot deep to Dakorien, and he went up there and said, Wayne, coming up with a catch that would not only give the Oregon Ducks the lead, but effectively put an end to this game, as Oregon goes on to sneak this one out 31-24. A shout out to Dante Moore with almost 400 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. I'm sure he's definitely thankful to have the receiving core that he has. And Dakorien is thankful that another win means another NIL deal. But with the season heading towards the playoffs, Dakorien and the Ducks know that all they need to do is just finish off the rest of their season strong, starting with the final game of the regular season against UCLA. And it was another game where they were getting the ball to Dakorien on a jet touch pass, but this time he was showing some super strength, because before half he throws this one dude all the way to Madagascar, but shit, he might have some other powers too, because on his 1st down and 10 they want to take a shot downfield, and Dakorien is definitely open, but this ball hangs up in the air, so he just decides to go up and snag that shit in double coverage on the sideline and come down with the catch. I mean, he had 4 defenders around him and still made the play. And if he's coming up with a play in that kind of coverage, then there's no way that one dude can guard him. He got in the end zone for another touchdown at the end of the 3rd quarter, and this one would be enough to put an end to Oregon's regular season, as they go on to win 17-7 in a game where Dakorien went for over 150 yards and 1 touchdown again. And after the game, Oregon finds out that they will be playing against Minnesota in the Big 12 championship game. And as far as the season stats, it looks like Dakorien will end as the leader in every major category, which is probably the reason why he's still in the running to win this Heisman Trophy. But the only way he'll do it is if he has another incredible game, but most importantly wins this Big 12 championship against Minnesota. Now, this was a game where early on, and really throughout the entirety of the game, Dakorien and Dante Moore were not able to get on the same page. They were able to get themselves downfield a few times and even into field goal range, but throughout the entire first half they were just unable to connect in the end zone or even connect on big plays downfield. In the second half, Dakorien was making his impact felt more as far as yardage. But even when he would find himself wide open downfield, he and Dante just could not connect. Eventually though, he would come up with a big time catch downfield on a drive that not only led to a score, but ultimately led to Oregon winning this game, as they go on to close out the Big Ten Championship 18-10. And despite having no touchdowns, Dakorien still went for over 200 yards, earning himself the player of the game, and in the process the right to call Oregon a Big Ten champion. But now that the year is over, there are some awards to be given out, and it turns out that Avery Johnson out of Kansas State wins the Heisman. And I guess it's not really hard to see why when he has a 47-0 touchdown to interception ratio. But Dakorien Moore for back-to-back years did turn out to win the Best Receiver Award, and this time with even better numbers than he had last year, eclipsing over 100 receptions, over 2,000 yards, and 24 touchdowns. Absolutely the most dominant receiver in college football, so of course he goes on to win a few other awards. But now it's time for Dakorien to play in the college football playoffs, and this is what he's been waiting all season for. He's not going to forget what that loss to Georgia felt like until he wins a championship for himself. But first, Oregon has to take care of business in their first matchup against Boston College. Unlike the previous game against Minnesota, Dante and Dakorien Moore were easily able to connect for a touchdown early on in this game, coming up with a score to give Oregon an early 7-0 lead, and they never seemed to look back, because by the time they got the ball in the second quarter, Oregon was already up 21-3, and Dakorien was only coming up with his third catch of the day, and it already looked like he was headed towards the end zone for his second touchdown before he fumbled, giving Boston College a chance to pick it up, but he recovers, grabbing his own fumble for the touchdown he was going to have anyway. And at that point, Boston College had a feeling that things were definitely not going their way. But things would be solidified even further after they decided to take a shot deep to Dakorien Moore. And he actually came up with the catch right before half and ran into the end zone to not only give his team another score, but put this game away, as Oregon goes off to blow the doors off of Boston College 38-6. And Dakorien Moore was back to having another 200-yard game off of only 5 receptions and 3 touchdowns. But at this point, Dakorien can feel that he's only one game away from getting back to the national championship. He and the Oregon Ducks have been rolling all season since the first game of the year where they lost. But now there is one team standing in their way from getting back to where they were, as they are set to face off against SMU. Now this game started off a little bit crazy because on the opening drive this pop pass did not work out. But on the very next play, Dakorien was able to break open over the top and come up with the catch before finding his way streaking towards the end zone for the first points for either team in this game. And he's letting everybody know that he feels like he should have won that Heisman. And he was looking to prove it even further throughout the rest of this game, because after he exploits this cover 2, he's coming up with another touchdown, now making this a 14-point game before SMU actually ties it up after half. And that seemed to be all good though, bro, because Dakorien was just moving on a different level. This dude was just blazing past the entire defense and was now making his way into the end zone for his third score of the game. And you might think that this was the last big play that he makes, but nah, SMU is a pretty good team and they tie it back at 21. So now with under a minute left and a chance to go to the national championship, Oregon needs somebody to make a play. And of course it would be Dakorien Moore, who was coming up with a catch downfield and bringing his team all the way across the goal line for a touchdown to not only take the lead in this game, but send them back to the national championship. Oregon goes on to close this game out 28-21, and Dakorien Moore wins player of the game with over 270 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns. An excellent performance that earns him the right to have a rematch against the same team that he lost to last season. This time, though, Dakorien feels like things are going to be very different. He believes in what he can provide to his offense and knows that if he can just try to score every single drive in this game, then there's absolutely no way that Georgia can get them this time. Then the Oregon Ducks could win their first ever national championship. We start here on 1st and 10 where Dakorien is pushing inside but breaking back out, and he's coming up with the catch before diving across the goal line for a score. An incredible way to cap off this opening drive of the championship game. But nah, see, he knew he couldn't just stop there. So after his defense comes up with the stop, he zooms past the defender before coming up with another catch. And this time there was nobody within 15 yards of him as he runs across the goal line and gets in for another score, already making it 2 touchdowns for him and 14-0 for the team. and he had to make sure he wasn't dreaming of nothing because he felt like this was a little too easy. But soon he would realize there was absolutely no reason to feel like that, because that Georgia defense would start to kick in, because they come up with an interception that goes all the way back to the crib for 6, making it now a one-possession game before Dante Moore goes right back out there on the field and throws another interception. And at this point, things were definitely not looking good for Oregon after they had a 14-0 lead, because now after halftime they are down. And even with Dakorien Moore coming up with a nice play where he brought his team deeper into opposing territory, Dante Moore was going out there throwing another pick and giving Georgia a chance to extend their lead. But they were trying to make sure that it stopped right there. So Dakorien went out there, ran this in route, and they threw another pick. And this time Georgia was definitely going to be able to take advantage of this field position. Eventually though, all that shit would end though, because Dante Moore would find Dakorien to the outside, and he was making his way to the end zone for another touchdown on the game and giving Oregon a little bit of life. But now in the fourth quarter, they are down by 2 possessions, and even with Dakorien Moore coming up with some great plays, stiff-arming a dude to the dirt, Oregon still had a lot of work to do. They were just lucky that they had Dakorien Moore to help do that work, because as he gets across the goal line for another touchdown on the day, he was doing more than anybody else other than his defense, who was giving them a chance to go back and win the game. And with 3 minutes left, Dakorien was running to the sideline, and he came up with another catch, getting in for his 5th touchdown of the game, setting his season high in the national championship with a score that actually takes the lead over Georgia. And just like I said, the only thing doing more than him is their defense, as they give the offense another chance to put this game away. But with this running game not really doing too well, it's looking like Georgia's going to have a chance to get the ball back and potentially steal this game for themselves. But Dakorien Moore was going to make sure that that did not happen. So on this 3rd down and 10, he is speed boosting past his defender and coming up with the catch, making his way towards the end zone to not only extend the lead for Oregon, but win their first ever national championship and cement his legacy forever. Dakorien Moore would lead the Oregon Ducks to their first ever national championship victory, and he would do it in a game with 18 receptions, 487 yards, and 6 touchdowns. A record-breaking performance in a game that probably goes down as one of the best championship games in college football history, as Oregon finishes it off 42-35 and officially reached the top of the college football world. And they can definitely be thankful that they were able to flip Dakorien from LSU in order for them to lead Oregon up to this point. But now that the season is officially over, we can take a look at the season stats. And Dante Moore was actually one of the country leaders in passing yards and touchdowns. And with the help of Dakorien Moore's over 3,000 yards and 36 touchdowns, with Dakorien Moore becoming the all-time national leaders for receiving yards and receiving touchdowns in a career. Same thing for in a single season, and even in a single game. In the national championship, he broke the record for the most yards ever. Showing up big in the biggest moments of the game is something that Dakorien Moore has proven that he's capable of since he was in high school. But at this point, Dakorien has 1 more year before he can prove it on the biggest stage in the world. But maybe for his last year in college, he can transfer to another school and win a Heisman. But I'll just leave that decision up to you guys. If you want to see a part 3, be sure to get this one to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. But also be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next, and check out some of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. And other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.